To become a great podcaster, you have to develop the skill of making a conversation engaging, easy to listen to, and also great for the guest. That's how you're going to pull out the best information. The best podcasters in the world have all mastered this skill. I've conducted hundreds of interviews. I've studied the best in the world. And in this video, I'm going to share with you how you can become a world-class podcast host to help in growing your show way faster. And so there's two tiers I'm going to break this video down into. The first is the common mistakes, the ones that like 99% of podcasters make. And the next section is that 1% extra that really separates the best from the pretty good. And in the world of podcasting, you want to make sure that you are the best because there's so much competition out there. The first thing is that most new podcast hosts are just annoying. They make their episodes incredibly hard to listen to by making a few common mistakes. When you are conducting an interview, whether it's in person or virtual, your natural tendency is to say yes all the time, to acknowledge to the other person that you're paying attention. It's really hard to listen to. And so it's a hard pattern because you do want to be respectful, but change that habit of speaking to show you're listening to giving some sort of nonverbal cue. So either shaking your head or acknowledging it with a facial expression. That is so much better because the guest actually knows that you're listening. You're still paying attention, and then it doesn't actually impair the listening or the viewing experience for the viewer. So if you just simply do that, you are instantly in the top like 10% of podcast hosts, because even some relatively big shows still make that mistake all the time. They're really annoying and it's hard to listen to. What I want you to do is go back through your 5 most recent episodes and listen for where you're being annoying. And as much as it may hurt, ask someone who doesn't love your show to listen to it and say, like, what is the annoying parts of this? What am I doing that's making this harder to listen to? Everyone has their own little tics. It might be saying like all the time. It may be saying or yup. Whatever it is, spot those for yourself and make a conscious effort to remove them as much as you can, episode over episode. Eventually, you'll reach a place where you have almost none of them when you speak, and it will make your episodes way better. The next mistake that almost every podcaster makes is not listening to their guest. And so what I mean by that is, of course, they're listening and they're actually hearing what they're saying, but actively listening is a completely different ballgame. And so you're only actively listening if you're able to be dynamic in your questions. So a lot of podcasters make the mistake of getting stuck in their next question. So they turn off their brain, obsessing over what they're about to ask next, and they miss golden opportunities to go down different paths that their guest gives them through their previous answer. And this is so frustrating as a listener when a host does this, because you hear an opportunity to go down a very interesting path and the host just completely missed it because they were so locked in on their next question. So to get better at this, give yourself the opportunity that you would in a conversation with your friend. If you had a thought or something that really interested you, you'd give yourself a second to pause, collect a good question, and then deliver it. Just because you're in an interview, don't change how you would normally speak. The listener is going to give you the benefit of the doubt to take that pause and collect yourself. And they'll love the fact that you did it because you actually made the conversation a lot more interesting. And the questions that are going to come from this are going to be so much better that the guest is going to appreciate it as well. So don't get locked in on your next question. Actively listen and look for opportunities to pull on strings or go down paths to lead to a way better and more interesting conversation. A lot of podcasters stick to their script, and that's why when someone goes on a bunch of podcasts, it's almost the same episode over and over because they're not actively listening. They're not asking dynamic questions. That's how you can separate yourself. Cutting off your guest is another massive mistake. You may have things you want to say, but let your guest speak, especially if this is an interview style show. Yes, people love you. They want to come back because of the questions that you ask, but let your guest shine. You're going to win the most through doing this. And if you give them the floor to actually go and elaborate on questions and just supplement it with when they need support and guidance, you're going to get some of the best content and answers you could ever ask for. And this is the kind of content that really goes viral when it's far deeper because you actually let them speak. And this is also how you can differentiate yourself. If you have someone who's been on a bunch of other podcasts, when they come on your podcast, actually give them full reign. Let them speak to their heart's content. Let them go down those rabbit holes to give more and fresh content that people haven't seen before. Do everything you can not to cut them off. Let them speak, and then also develop some sort of pattern to show when you are done speaking if it's not a clear and obvious question. And also pick up on how someone else shows you that. Every guest is going to be a little bit different in how they show that they're done, but make sure they're finished because some of the best content gets cut off right before it could be great because they're so eager to jump in. And again, this comes down to having comfort with the conversation, being comfortable in the silence, that 1 or 2 second pause that you wait to see if they're done speaking. To you feels like an eternity. To them, it feels like nothing. And to the person listening, they didn't even notice and it could be edited out later. So always err on the side of letting them speak and letting them go more in depth. The final super common mistake that I would say 99% of podcasters make is being way too rigid. It's great to come into a conversation with a plan, thinking about the content that you may pull from it, but when you have a line-by-line script, it turns a conversation into a robotic exchange. And so many podcasts have fallen victim to this, where it just feels like a regurgitation of everything you've already heard because they've seen it be successful elsewhere. Of course, you want to sprinkle in some elements to get some clips that you know will do well, but don't be super rigid with the conversation and be genuinely curious. It's going to make for some fantastic conversations. If you just correct those previous mistakes that I've outlined, you will instantly be a top 1% podcaster. And if you want to get into the top 1% of the 1%, these are the final tips that can really take it over the top that the best podcasters in the world swear by. The first tactic is a psychological principle. It's called priming. So essentially, you purposely use your language or your delivery to prime someone for your desired outcome. This happens all the time and you're not even aware of it. There's priming going on in everything that you do. And so strategic marketers or interviewers in this case use priming to prepare their guests for a question to get them in the best place possible to answer that question to the best of their ability. And there are so many examples of this. I recommend looking more into priming and actually reading the book called Persuasion, where it's all about the priming influence and how powerful this stuff really is. But for a few quick examples for the sake of this video, a simple priming question could be something as simple as, can I ask you a crazy question? Why this is so powerful is because now the guest instantly goes to the craziest place they can conceive in their mind. So almost anything that you are about to say won't be viewed as that crazy and they won't be caught off guard. Whereas if you just had have led with a kind of crazy question, they may have been taken back by that, felt a little bit threatened, and the response would have been either very reserved or not as good. So a simple little priming sentence can have such a large impact. And there's countless examples of this. Please go read that book. I use these little things deliberately in conversations all the time that they become automatic, and they are very powerful tools in podcasting and just in the real world as well. So you don't want to copy anyone else's questions, but it is very powerful to use proven questions or proven frameworks for questions. Study the best podcasters in the world and see what questions they use repeatedly, and then think about the why behind that question. Is it because of the content that they get out of it? Does it make the guest feel more comfortable? Try to understand the deeper reasoning as to why they keep using that question, and then think about how you could incorporate a question that has those same kind of elements that you add to your arsenal that you use consistently whenever you need it. And another thing to ask better questions is to avoid anything that could be easily Googled. If your guest has been on a bunch of shows, they're tired of asking the same questions over and over again, especially if they could be answered by a simple Google search. So if you are thinking of questions and it could be easily Googled and answered, you got to make that question better. The audience doesn't get anything from it. The guest is tired of answering it. It doesn't lead to good content. Go deeper, ask a more thoughtful and deliberate question. And when you see this happen, when there's a guest on there who's kind of numb to being on podcasts because they get the same boring bullshit questions, when they get a good question, you literally see them spark up and they're far more actively engaged in the conversation and their energy raises. So all the best podcast interviews that have gone extremely viral, they've brought up the energy through amazing questions, and it just made the whole conversation way more engaging. So study great questions, understand the why behind the question. If a question is easily Googleable, it's probably not a good question. And the last thing is to understand when you want to use these specific tools. You're studying questions to figure out the impact that it creates, and the real skill comes down to knowing exactly when to use them. So be conscious of that while you're studying as well, seeing where they're using it within the conversation and the kind of impact that it has. How did it change the conversation? Because some of these questions are going to be way better for the beginning because it's an icebreaker. Some may be good for the middle because it's a little lull, and then some may be a fantastic endpoint for a bow on the conversation. But questions matter, so study this stuff and become a great question master. If you want to grow your podcast audience and make more money from your show, make sure to subscribe to our free weekly newsletter. Once a week, I send strategy directly to your inbox to help you do those things, to grow your show, run it more effectively, and to make more money. We also break down some of the best podcasting content to show you why it worked, as well as some of the stuff that underperforms so that you don't make the same mistakes. It's completely free, comes once a week. I think you'll love it, and it's linked down below. Again, it's completely free. So go ahead and sign up, and I will see you in your inbox. So building off the previous point, a unique approach is huge. If you want to be shared and you want your content to go everywhere, it has to have great engagement metrics. So people have to be actively consuming this content for a long period of time. And you really only do that through being unique, because simply by being unique and something people haven't seen before, that acts as a pattern interrupt. Most people are just numb going through life and they're numb consuming the content that they consume. But if something is extremely unique and makes them feel something they haven't felt in a while, they're far more likely to want to share that content, consume more of it, and keep coming back. So you want to make sure that you are really being you in the conversation and allowing your personality to come through with a unique approach, not just to questions, but the whole overall feel of your show. And someone who does this incredibly well is Kurt Jaimungal from a show that I watch called Theories of Everything. And he goes so deep in the research for any guest that he has on because he doesn't want to ask any question that the guest has already been asked before. And so that's his unique differentiator, his crazy level of research. That's how he stands out. And I noticed that right away because I had seen some episodes from people that I liked that had been on his show, and I'd seen a bunch of their other interviews and they all kind of felt the same. These felt so different and it was so easy to see. And I subscribed for more right away. That's the power of being unique. And for you, it may not look like super crazy levels of research, although I do always recommend that. It gives you more tools to go down. But think about how you can be unique. What are the elements of you that make you special, unique, world-class? You want to incorporate those kinds of things into your show. For Kurt, he did just that. He is a very smart, intellectual person that loves deep, thorough research. I believe he's a mathematics major. And so he took that, his unique skill set, and ran with it in the podcast setting. How can you do that? What are you known for? What do your friends come for? What are you uniquely good at? And how can we make that part of this show? Work on that and look at all your favorite shows. They all do this. It's unique. It's them. That's why you come back. The final point to make you a truly elite podcaster is hook points. And so this is the art of framing questions as hooks that then allow you to take your conversation and cut it up into content that acts as a marketing tool for your overall show. So this largely comes down to research beforehand and thinking about what are the most interesting, compelling, or controversial, anything that gets people excited that people need to watch. What are the most interesting elements of that person, and how could you frame a question to tee them up to then deliver that kind of content? Anybody who you have on your show, there's specific hook points that make them interesting. If they're not a very famous person, it may be what they do. It may be who they know. Everyone has hook points about them, and your ability to pull them out of a guest will dictate how well the content performs from it. And there's a book written completely on this topic called Hook Points by Brendan Kane, and he breaks this down very well. I recommend getting that book. We've linked it down below. He breaks down the whole concept of coming prepared for the content you're going to get out of the conversation. So you don't want to be super rigid with every single question, as we've discussed, but having hook points that you can go to in lulls of the conversation is a cheat code for getting clips that are actually going to perform, which grows your influence, grows your audience, and your income, all because you were strategic about the hook point that you teed the guest up for the best possible content. And everyone wins when you do this. The guest looks great. They get to talk about something they know or something that's super interesting. And don't do gotcha questions. So obviously if it is really controversial, ask them beforehand, but it leads to way better content. So pick up that book and start preparing your hook points before you go into the conversation. So when naturally it comes up, you can tee it up in the best way possible. If you've taken some value from this video, we actually released all of this content in our newsletter 2 weeks ago. So if you want to get this stuff as soon as it drops, make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter and the channel as well. Why not? I know you want to go full-time on your podcast, and to do that, you need to start making money from your show. Luckily, that's completely possible, even if you have a small audience. And in this video right here, I walk through 10 proven tactics that small podcasters can use to make some serious money. So if you want to make more money from your show, check out this video right here. I will see you over there, and happy podcasting. Peace.